If you've ever met someone, heard their name clearly, maybe even repeated it once, and then forgotten it just seconds later, you probably felt a quiet kind of embarrassment. And what makes it worse is that it doesn't feel like a big mistake. It feels like something small, but strangely personal. Like you should have remembered. Like something about you just didn't pay enough attention. But people who forget names easily often don't realize it's not really about memory. It's about where your mind was in that moment. Because when someone introduces themselves, most people assume the brain is focused on the name. But for some people, that's the least active part of what's happening. Instead, their attention is somewhere else entirely. They're thinking about how they're coming across, whether they're saying the right thing, how the interaction feels, what impression they're making. And while all of that is happening, the name passes through unnoticed. Not ignored, just not prioritized. It doesn't mean you don't care about the person. It often means you care too much about the interaction. That slight anxiety, that internal checking, it pulls attention inward. So instead of fully receiving information, you're managing yourself. And names, unfortunately, require presence. They're one of the first things lost when your awareness shifts away from the moment. And here's something subtle. People who forget names easily often remember everything else. The tone of the conversation, the energy of the person, what they were wearing, even small emotional details most people miss. But the name disappears. Because their mind isn't built to hold labels first. It's tuned to experience. And that creates an interesting pattern. Because socially, names are seen as important. Remembering them signals attention, respect, connection. So when you forget, it can feel like you failed at something basic. But internally, the process wasn't careless, it was overloaded. There's also another layer to this. Some people don't just forget names, they hesitate to use them. Even when they do remember. They replay it in their head first. Was that the right name? What if I say it wrong? What if it sounds awkward? So instead of risking a small mistake, they avoid using it altogether. And over time, that avoidance quietly reinforces the forgetting. Because what isn't used isn't reinforced. But even that hesitation isn't random. It's tied to how safe someone feels making small social errors. For some people, even minor mistakes feel amplified. Not logically, but emotionally. It feels like being noticed in the wrong way. And the brain adapts by minimizing those risks, even if it means losing something as simple as a name. And here's where it gets interesting. For a lot of people, forgetting names isn't about distraction. It's about internal pressure, the need to get it right, to be socially smooth, to not appear awkward or forgetful. And that pressure does something unexpected. It splits attention. Part of you is in the moment, and part of you is observing yourself in the moment. And when that split happens, memory weakens. Because memory depends on full presence, not partial awareness. So it's not that your brain can't remember names, it's that it wasn't fully available when the name appeared. And over time, this creates a quiet identity pattern. I'm just bad with names. It becomes something you assume about yourself, something you even say casually. But that identity can hide what's actually happening underneath. Because when you believe it's just a flaw, you stop noticing the conditions that create it. The social tension, the internal monitoring, the subtle anxiety of being perceived. And all of that continues, unnoticed. There's also something deeper tied to how certain people process connection. For some, connection isn't built through labels, it's built through feeling, through tone, presence, shared moments. Names feel secondary, almost like surface-level identifiers, so the brain doesn't treat them as emotionally important, and memory follows emotional importance more than logical importance. So if something doesn't feel meaningful in the moment, it doesn't anchor, even if you know it should. And this creates a quiet disconnect, because externally it may seem like forgetfulness, but internally it's a different kind of attention, one that prioritizes depth over detail, experience over structure. And that's why someone can remember how you made them feel, but forget what you said your name was. Not because it didn't matter, but because something else mattered more. And once that pattern repeats enough times, it becomes automatic. The brain starts to expect that names won't stick, so it invests even less energy into holding them. Not consciously, just quietly. And that's how something small turns into a consistent trait. But the real reason isn't what most people think. It's not about intelligence. It's not about effort. It's about attention and what your mind is trying to protect in social moments. Because in those first few seconds of meeting someone, your brain is making a decision. Focus outward or manage inward. And for some people, managing inward feels safer, even if it costs small details like names. And when you start to see it that way, the pattern changes meaning. It's no longer just forgetfulness. It's a reflection of how you relate to attention, pressure, and connection. And once you notice that, you begin to understand something deeper, that the way you remember things isn't random. It follows your emotional priorities, your sense of safety, your internal focus. So forgetting names isn't just a memory issue, it's a pattern. And like most patterns, it tells a story. Not about what you lack, but about what your mind is trying to do in social moments. And once you see it, you can't really unsee it, because it was never just about names. It was about where you were when they were spoken. And that awareness alone quietly changes how you understand yourself. If this explains something you've noticed but never fully understood, there's always more beneath the surface. Because understanding yourself is where everything starts.